So today I am going to talk about franchise and non-franchise state distribution agreements. And before I do so, I wanted to just briefly talk about the three-tier system, which I'm sure many of you already know that in the beverage alcohol industry, we have 3 tiers in which we sell products. So the first tier is the supplier, manufacturer, importer tier. The second is wholesaler, distributor, and I'm going to use both terms interchangeably. And then last is the retailer, and of course, consumers purchase their goods from the retailer. So today, when we're talking about the distribution agreements, we're going to be talking about the supplier distributor level. So just by way of background, back in 1933, after the repeal of Prohibition, what happened was that beverage alcohol reverted back to the individual states. So the states could decide how they could distribute the products. So there were 2 different categories. We have open states, which allows private individuals to be licensed and actually distribute the products within the states. And then we also have control states. And in the control states, the government would dictate how the products would be distributed within their borders. So here you can see we have a map of the United States that highlights both the control and open states. So the purple would be the control states, which there are 17 states in Montgomery County, and then you have the open states that are in blue. So I'm bringing this up just so you understand that there is a division between the types of states where you distribute, but what we're going to do is concentrate on the open states when it relates to franchise and non-franchise. So in the franchise states, you have approximately 50% are for distilled spirits. And then the percentage is a little higher for wine products. And then the due diligence, when you're talking about your distribution agreement or negotiating the terms with your wholesaler, it's good to understand whether or not you're dealing in a franchise or a non-franchise states. Now, most people call me and they ask me if distribution agreements are necessary. And as an attorney, what do you think I say? Absolutely yes. But there's a reason for it. It's not just because I want to generate some bills and do some work, but there are reasons that we're going to go through here. So why? Well, when you work on your distribution agreement, you're negotiating with your distributor and you're going to be talking about some of the key terms, right? So there's an understanding between both parties as to what you're going to do, who does what. The second, it identifies the roles and responsibilities. So again, who is responsible for handling what aspect of this business? Third, you're going to manage each party's expectation because you have it in writing. When you first meet, everything is great. You have a wonderful relationship. Everyone's really excited. But when you put it in writing, at least you can put that to bed and don't have to look at it until afterwards if, God forbid, there's an issue. And then lastly, if there is an issue, at least you have your means for resolution. How do you go about resolving that conflict? So some of the key distribution agreement terms we're going to go through and just highlight. So, and these are going to be for the non-franchise states to start. So first, where are you going to be distributing these products? Are you going to be distributing in one particular state? Are you going to be in multiple states? Say you want to be in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Do you want to be in a region? Do you want to go down the northeast corridor? Or do you want to be nationwide? So once you understand where you're going to be, that's obviously a good start. Secondly, what products are you selling? Well, if I currently have some wine products, I know what they are, right? They exist, I have them, I want to sell them. But what about future products? So say right now I have Donna's Vodka, that's my brand. And I also have a gin, so it's called Donna's Gin. Well, if I bring on a new product, is that something that goes with that distributor, or can I give it to somebody else? Or if I have a line extension, so I have Donna's Vodka, I have Donna's Gin, and now let's say I want to come up with a bourbon or an American whiskey. Is that a line extension? Well, if it's under the Donna's label, I would say yes, and therefore it should go with that distributor. However, if Steve is producing a vodka out of Italy, and I decide to bring it in, that would be a new product, so I have Steve's Vodka. So as a new product, should that distributor get that brand? Now, lots of times people don't think about this. They may be acquiring different products, maybe they're expanding, maybe they're merging with another company that has a different portfolio. Where do those new products go? Well, your distributor most likely is going to want to have the opportunity to represent any brand that you bring in or that you're distributing. So they would want what's called the right of first refusal. So with line extensions, generally the distributor will get it, but with new products, that's not always the case. So it's something to think about. Do you want that product to go with a distributor? Now, my distributor may specialize in distilled spirits. So if I'm working with vodka, gin, my American whiskey, my bourbon, that's fantastic. But if I'm importing Steve's wine from Italy, well, maybe that distributor doesn't have the expertise in the wine industry. Maybe that's a hand sell product that should go to a different distributor that specializes in wine, maybe going to white tablecloth accounts. So in that case, it may make business sense to go with a different distributor. So it's something to think about, talk about with your distributor when you're talking about your terms for your agreement. So pricing and payment. You have your products, now you're selling to your distributor. What's the price point for those products? Personally, I like to add in an exhibit that shows the products that you're selling, the different sizes, and the prices that you are going to be paying when you first set out the terms of your agreement. Then you could always update it as you go by, depending on the terms of your agreement. The frequency of the price changes. How often can you make these changes? Well, suppliers sometimes want to increase their prices. It could be due to increased cost of goods. It could be, there could be a gas surcharge. There could be another, a bunch of other different reasons. So when can you make those increases? Well, just because your cost of goods increased yesterday doesn't mean that the next day that you can just automatically increase the price to the distributor. Many states require price posting. And so for the wholesaler to make that change, they would have to file a document. The change would have to take place over a period of time. It could take 30, 60, 90, maybe up to 120 days. So therefore, that change can't be automatic. So that needs to be understood between the parties. And then when you're making those changes, then you can talk about it. But you don't want to make changes too frequently. And I can guarantee that the distributor won't want you to as well. And then lastly, how and when are payments made? Are you sending out an invoice, or is it going to be electronic payment? So again, this way everybody knows what the terms of your agreement are and how you're going to be working together. So now roles and responsibility. Now, suppliers usually will hire a distributor, and their expectation is they're going to be distributing products in whatever territory it is, whether it's just state, regional, or otherwise. So when they're calling on accounts, who's responsible for going there? Is it just the distributor? If I'm a supplier and I've hired a couple of great salespeople and they're going out and trying to sell the product, what accounts are they going to? You don't want to have overlap. So it's good to break out who's going to be responsible for going to what accounts. Maybe the distributor is going to handle all accounts, but you have a specialized team that's going to work on national accounts. So again, if you set your expectations at the beginning and you have clear understanding between the parties, I think things will run a lot smoother. Inventory levels. So inventory levels affect both sides. So if you're a supplier, you want to make sure that your distributor has enough inventory in the warehouse to sell through into the marketplace. Now, everybody wants a hot brand, right? You want to have your products flying off the shelves, and you want your distributor to be able to meet those demands. So again, how much inventory do they need to hold in their warehouse to get it through to the market? On the flip side, the distributor is also going to want the supplier to have a fair amount of inventory at their disposal. Again, we're talking about new businesses, it could be craft, someone just starting out, and we know inventory is expensive. So how much inventory will you have at your disposal? Again, the distributor's out marketing the product, they're doing a fantastic job, your brand's really high. Can you meet that demand? Because the worst thing that you could possibly have is a hot brand and you can't get the product to the consumers. Marketing plans and support. So as a supplier, it's important to have a marketing plan. And it wouldn't just be for a couple of months. Generally, you're going to have an annual business plan, and then you're going to have that built out for several years. You want to be able to sit down with your distributor and go through those plans. What kind of events are you going to have? What kind of advertising? How many people do you have on the ground from the supplier side? Who's going to be doing what at the distributor level? So this way you have a rounded out plan and everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, so this way you can get your brand sold. And then last is reporting. Now we know reports are very important when you're trying to evaluate your business. So distributors have so much data at their fingertips. So they're able to collect all this information for you, and they have a wealth of knowledge as to what brands are doing and what's trending. So as a supplier, it's really important to get the right information so you know how your brand's growing. The only thing I caution, though, is because distributors have so much information that you don't want to overwhelm them and ask them for everything at their disposal. They can give you every type of report that you could possibly want, but the question is, are you going to use that information? So I would suggest meeting with your distributor, talking with them, and saying, what kind of information can you give me? And how often can you do it? Now, some people will generate it, some distributors will generate the information in-house and they can distribute it to you. Or other organizations have a portal for the supplier where you can actually go in and then you can check on your inventory, you can check on your POS, you can check on sales in various territories. And that information is at your fingertips so you can control it. But again, talk to your distributor, see what information they have available for you, and then utilize it to sell your brand. Term, pretty straightforward. How long will you be in this partnership with your distributor? And it is a partnership. I mean, one can't do something without the other, and it's best to go in and decide what is best for you. Oftentimes, I guess we've gone in different cycles where wholesalers wanted to have written agreements for long term, went for a period where they could be 10 years long. Then we went through another cycle where they did away with agreements and they said, oh, it's okay, we'll just work together and take it from there. Then we went back to written agreements and then the terms started to shift. So they weren't 10 years, but a distributor may want 5 years, suppliers like to have shorter term, so it varies. So it depends on what type of brand you have, how long you've been in the industry, what kind of relationship you may or may not have with the distributor already, and then you figure out what works best for you. Now, when you're talking about the length of your term, the term of your agreement, there are certain things that you can do to extend it. So there's something called automatic renewal. You can have an agreement, say it's for 1 year. You start January 1 and you end on December 31st. Well, you can have a provision in there where you don't have to do anything. It will automatically turn over, and it could be for that same term. So if you had a 1-year agreement, it automatically turns over for another year, or you can have it for multiple years. Again, something to talk about with your distributor. You can have an agreement where it just expires, where you say, okay, January 1, December 31st, then we're done. And then you could decide what you want to do. Or you can have a provision in there where the agreement either continues and it's automatic renewal, and if you decide to terminate, you have to provide so many days notice. It could be 30, 60, 90, 120, whatever you decide. And therefore, if one party notices the other, then you can get out of the agreement. Termination. Not something that we like to talk about it, but it is a reality. How do you get out of your agreement with your distributor? Well, there are generally 2 ways. You can get out without cause, sometimes called for convenience. And this method, generally one party or the other will send a notice to the other side saying we'd like to end our relationship. You give so much notice, say it's 120 days, and this would allow both parties to wind down the business. The other way is for cause. And for cause could be for a variety of reasons. It could be based upon performance. Maybe your distributor is not meeting the goals that you've both agreed to. It could be breach of a material term of your distribution agreement. It could be financial. What if your distributor goes bankrupt? Well, how are they going to sell your products? Change of control. You may have joined with a distributor because you liked the management team, you liked the ownership. But what if the business was sold, merged, something happened? Maybe that's a reason you want to get out. Or loss of license. If your distributor doesn't have a license, they can't sell your products. So intellectual property is something that I think is very important for our brands. And sometimes people forget that their brands should be protected. And I mean protected by filing for a certificate of registration at the US Patent and Trade Office. So if I have my brand, it's Donna's brand. I'm spending a lot of money, time, effort trying to build that brand. I'm working with my distributor. So now I go and I get a registration certificate. So once I do that, I have to be very careful as to who can use my mark, right? So I'm trying to protect it. It's called policing the mark. So I'm going to license my distributor a limited non-exclusive license to use my brand specifically for promoting, selling my products. I'll put that in the agreement. Generally, I say the term that they can use my mark is for the length of our agreement. And then if we part ways, that license stops. And then also what I like to do with our distributors is ask them to be the eyes and ears in the marketplace to make sure that my mark is protected. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, I have my brand, the distributor's going out there, putting my brand on the shelves. They may be meeting with people, talking to people, and they hear things usually before others. So there's a market, there's a new brand out in the market called Donna's, but it's not D-O-N-N-A''S, it's D-O-N-A''S. Well, that could be confusingly similar, and it's a vodka as well. So now you have Donna's with two N's, you have Donna with one N. Well, I would like my distributor to let me know so then I can go out there and protect my mark. And again, these are partners. So if you work with them, talk with them, they can help you police your brand as well. Now, what happens when your agreement either expires or terminates? Well, it's a business, right? So your product, you're going out there, you have people at the distributor, they're selling your products, they're running events, and that's fantastic. But there's going to be a wind down period that you need to get your products and move to a different distributor. So you may have pending orders. So Steve has such a great product in Italy, I ordered a full container. That container is on the water now, but I already gave notice to my distributor that I don't want to work with him anymore. So what do? He has this container coming in. Well, I would like to reserve the right in my agreement that if that container is on the water, I can divert it. I can cancel it, or I can say that order is now going to go to my new distributor. Why? Because if I terminated my distributor, especially for cause, why would I give them that container of product? Now, they purchased it, right? It's theirs, but I don't want them selling my product. They did a terrible job. That's why we're no longer working together. So I want to divert it to the new distributor. Inventory, same scenario, except we're talking about inventory that's right in the warehouse from my existing distributor. Distributor didn't sell my product the way I wanted. They have 90 days worth of inventory. They have 2,000 cases of my product. What do? I like to reserve the right in my distribution agreement that I can repurchase that product if I want. So if I'm building a brand here in the US and I'm getting Steve's product again from Italy, and I can't get that product in fast enough, well, I just appointed a new distributor. How are they going to sell if they don't have any product? So I want the ability to repurchase that product back from my former distributor and then sell it over to my new distributor so I can get product in the market. And last, marketing and advertising materials, same thing. I just spent a ton of money on a new ad campaign. I have POS everywhere. I have flyers, I have advertising material, you name it, I have it. We're running all these events, except I had a problem with my distributor. So it's a brand new campaign, right? This stuff costs a lot of money. I want to give it to my new distributor. Well, I reserve the right in my distribution agreement that if we terminate, I can repurchase that material back. In this way, the new distributor doesn't miss a beat, we can run our events, and I don't have to have that produced yet again. Dispute resolution, pretty obvious. There are 3 basic ways that you can resolve your disputes with your distributor: mediation, arbitration, litigation. Most people think of litigation that you're going to go to court, you resolve it. Arbitration seems to be very popular because, again, it's usually a little cheaper and a little faster than litigation. And then in some cases, depending on the supplier and the distributor, mediation may work. Why? Because mediation, sometimes you can get somebody who actually understands this quirky little business of ours, and they may be able to resolve the issue better than a judge who knows nothing about it. So now we're going to just cross over to franchise states concerned. So we were talking about non-franchise states, basic distribution agreement terms, and now we're going to figure out, what does franchise mean? Now, most people think of a franchise, they may think of McDonald's, they may think of Starbucks, they may think of Dunkin' Donuts, Chili's, another national chain. Probably thinking this is where I go all the time to eat, but anyway, franchise, I pulled up a definition from Merriam-Webster online, and it says it's the right or license granted to an individual or group to market a company's goods or services in a particular territory, and it also means the territory involved in such right. So when we're talking about franchise, we're talking about the state. Now, a brand, so Donna's brand, if I'm selling it in a particular state and it happens to be a franchise state, if I say I'm not going to sell it anymore and I sell it to Steve, my good buddy Steve, he buys my brand, well, guess what? That franchise, the wholesaler that I'm with, goes with the brand. It follows it. So Steve is now stuck with my distributor, good, bad, or indifferent. So the basic differences between franchise and non-franchise, we're going to talk about just 4 points, are territory and the exclusivity aspect, definition of a brand, term, and termination. So for non-franchise states who are saying territory, it's negotiated by the parties, right? You may be in one particular state, say we're in New York. Or you can break it up and say, well, I want to be in Metro New York, but I don't want to be in upstate New York. And you decide. And then exclusivity, you can decide if your wholesaler is going to be exclusive, or some states you may have to be exclusive, but at least you have that freedom. Franchise is dictated by the state statute. So when you're going into a franchise state, you definitely want to look and see what that particular state statute says, because it is going to guide the terms of your distribution agreement. In most cases, exclusivity is required. However, there are some states that allow you to have dueling distributors. So that means you can have 2 distributors. Like New Jersey, for instance, you can have more than 1 distributor selling your products. Line extensions, again, negotiated by the parties, right? So if I have Donna's Vodka, Donna's Gin, Donna's American Whiskey, and Bourbon, fine, I could sit there and choose what I want to do with it. And new products, again, will they get Steve's Vodka or not? Again, something you can negotiate. Franchise, line extensions automatically go to your distributor, so it's not up for discussion. And then new products, again, it varies. So you want to look at your state statutes to find out what you can and cannot do in that particular state. So your term, I see a common theme here. Non-franchise, guess what? You get to negotiate your terms. Franchise, though, it's generally indefinite duration, because if you recall, we were talking about whether you have, we'll go to the next slide. Good cause, can you get out of this agreement, right? So in franchise state, you definitely need to have good cause. If you have good cause, you can't just say, okay, Mr. Distributor, I have good cause, you're terminated. That's not how it works. There's a process. So that process is you have to let the distributor know in writing why you want to terminate them. And they have the ability to cure. So saying you're working with a distributor and they did something wrong, whatever it is. They were not selling your product, they weren't following your plan, they weren't meeting some distribution goals, although that's not always a case for cause, but we'll just use that for argument's sake. You have to give them notice, say you didn't meet these goals, we agreed to them, and now you have X period of time in which to cure or fix that. So depending on what the state statute says, you may be able to they may be able to cure it, and if they do, guess what? You're stuck again. So you're going to be continuing to work with that distributor. I don't mean that in a bad way, but you're going to be working with that distributor again. You're not getting out of the agreement. And in some cases, you need to get ABC approval. So depending on the state, you may have to go to the local liquor board and get their approval, and they will determine whether or not you have good cause and can you get out of your agreement. Non-franchise, we said negotiated by the parties for termination. Now, what if you don't have good cause? Are you stuck with this distributor? Can you not get out unless you die? And if you do, that's somebody else's problem, but what do you do? There are a couple of ways to get out. So you can pay, it's a termination fee, but it's liquidated damages. What are they? Well, you can pay to get out of something. And I don't mean it in a nefarious way, not like a Sopranos way. I am from New Jersey, but that's not what I mean. So termination fee or liquidated damages fee is that you agree up front and you say, okay, and generally it could be an industry standard. I don't want to work with you anymore. This just isn't working out. We're like this when we're talking. You're not doing what I say. You don't think I listen. So let's try and move on. You can write in your agreement that you will pay a liquidated damages fee. What does that come out to be? Generally, it is 1 times your gross profit for a year. And depending on the brand or how long you've been with somebody, it could escalate. It could be 2 times, it could be more. It could be 10 times, it could be 6 times if you're in beer or something. So it varies. But again, something that you would negotiate up front, and then if God forbid something went wrong with your relationship, you can get out. Another way to get out is called brand swap. So if I'm working with distributor A, it's not working out, I want to go to distributor B. Distributor B may have a product the distributor A really wants. It would work with his portfolio. So you talk to your potential new distributor, maybe they work it out. Maybe he has Steve's vodka and they're going to trade Donna's for Steve's. Or maybe Steve has a bourbon and they have a gap and they need a bourbon. So it's possible that you can do a trade. Sometimes it works out perfectly, nice even trade. Sometimes maybe there's a payment. But again, at least it's an option to get out of your agreement. And then last, stop selling the product. Now this isn't something that I would favor. However, there are circumstances where this may be a good alternative. So I was working with an importer who was having an issue with the distributor. And they were concerned that they could not get out of this agreement. And we were talking about different ways of what they can do. Again, payment, swap, and or, has the brand even been sold in that state? So we did some research, and unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. They were selling it, but their sales were very slow. So he wasn't completely out of the state. But if you stop selling a brand, so say you're working with a distributor's not doing what they're supposed to, they're not making any sales, it's just trickling in, or they completely forget about your brand. Well, if you don't have sales and you're out of the market, say, for over 2 years, basically, again, general statement, then you're not making any sales. So then you're out of the market. In such case, you may be able to come back, say you stop concentrating on this particular state, you're focusing on some other areas, and you come back and you say, you know what, let's make this like a brand relaunch. We're going to come back into the state, we're going to have a great marketing plan, this is what we're going to do, but we're going to do it with a different distributor. If it's been a period of time and there have been no sales, that's an opportunity. But like I said, that's more of a last resort. So if you're desperate and you want to be able to get back in and it's just not working out, that may be an opportunity for you. So basically, in summary, just to reiterate some of these facts between franchise versus non-franchise, I always like to do my homework up front. Figure out where you want to be. Figure out if the state you're dealing with is a franchise state. Because if it is, it's really important to look at the state statutes. Obviously, case law helps too. But this way you understand what it is that you need to do to get out of your relationship with your distributor. If you know up front what you can and cannot do, you're in a better position, and you just hope that you don't have to deal with it, and you have a great partnership with your distributor, but at least you know up front and there are no surprises. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a highlight of franchise and non-franchise states and distribution agreements. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me after the break. Thank you.